So, Dom, the other day I'm watching TV and they have on this poll about whether or not Americans think the country is headed in the right direction. And listen, how the numbers broke down really doesn't matter. But I was just like, what the hell kind of question is that?
It sounds like a really informative question. I feel like I'm getting a lot of information out of that poll.
It tells you absolutely nothing because both a liberal and a conservative at this point would both say the country's headed in the wrong direction, but for completely different reasons.
Like, what's the purpose of it? To tell you, right? I mean, what's the purpose of it?
Exactly. And I think it's if you're going to do polling, you got to include the nuance, or you at least have to ask more specific questions, in my humble opinion. So we decided to make that the subject of this week's show because what the hell, news media? Let's start the show. Hi, I'm Jenna.
And I'm Dom. You know what's funny? Not long ago, we were both breaking news. Now we're
Breaking unemployment records.
exactly just like thousands of other journalists who've been laid off from newsrooms across the country.
Yeah, and after the shock wore off, we kept asking ourselves, what the hell do we do now?
And over many, many cups of coffee,
And maybe a few drinks.
we realized we had a unique opportunity here. Why not pull back the curtain on what's really happening in American media?
Right? I mean, we've spent years in this industry seeing how stories get made or don't, and now we can actually talk about it.
And trust me, there's a lot to talk about. From local news disappearing to social media reshaping journalism, we'll break it all down.
And look, we're not here to lecture anybody. We just want to help make sense of the information that we're getting and maybe have some much needed fun along the way.
So whether you're glued to the news, just trying to figure out what's real in your feed, or curious about the future of media, come hang with us.
Welcome to Laid Off and Looking, a podcast where two journalists
Are taking a critical look at American media. Yeah, Jenna, I mean, you know my opinion about polls. I feel you do, which
Yeah,
is the
no,
fact
I
that
get it.
I don't trust them. And I don't trust them because of the fact that I just question how many people are actually telling the truth to the pollsters. I feel like since 2016, especially, it's been really sketchy. People seem to want to tell others, where the pollsters, what they want to hear.
Ah, yes. Their representative answers the poll and not their true self. Now, I have to admit that there is some degree of science behind this, and that maybe pollsters do know how to probe a little more
Mhm.
behind the scenes to get you to answer as your honest self. But yeah, I think we all got burned by that 2016 election and what polling was saying and what ultimately happened.
And I think it also goes to the fact of you start questioning the places that are taking the polls, the information. Like we've sort of gotten into this. Was like how much of it is how diverse are the people you're talking to? What are the numbers of people you're talking to? I think those are always the questions that you have, and sometimes yes, when you see the data that comes from some of this, that is it helps to give you a better understanding. But my question is this, Jenna, what number is good when we're talking about taking a poll? What numbers are better in terms of this means the poll is more accurate if we poll this many people?
Absolutely. And what you said about diversity of polls is also, I think, a really big thing because just because you have, for example, my sensitive point and African American in the room does not mean this person speaks like you.
Hmm.
Consider you that your poll could include, I don't know, Candace Owens.
Right. Yeah,
I have a
exactly.
bone to pick. But like, because one of the other things that I remember going into this last election cycle was that some of the campaigns were engaging with pollsters who dealt specifically within minority groups to suss out the diversity within that. Because again, like I feel like, and I don't know, there's a whole bunch of reasons why there's different diversity within the LGBTQ community,
Hmm.
but it's not all like, oh, I'm queer, so obviously I think that.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that, what it comes back down to is the data, right? Like, what is the data that you're dealing with? And data usually is pretty straightforward, but sometimes also the people who when they're taking that information, the people who take that information, how do they tell the story with that information?
I was going to say the interpretation of the data and how that's presented to the public, I think is huge. So, with all of these qualms, concerns, confusion, and frankly, bones to pick, this week we decided to reach out to someone who is an expert in data journalism. And that, of course, is Jess Awtry. Jess is the Vice President of Digital Strategy and Communications at the Pew Research Center. And Jess gave us a few moments of her time. Audiences today are flooded with misinformation, viral posts, and AI generated content, but there's so much out there that it's getting harder to tell what's real. But the goal of journalism hasn't changed. It's still about challenging and telling the truth and explaining the world with evidence.
That's where data journalism comes in. It's not just about spreadsheets or charts. It can mean using data as a source in traditional reporting or creating visuals and tools that help people make sense of complex stories. Data journalism makes the work stronger. It adds context, helps reporters spot patterns, and keeps the focus on what's true instead of what's popular.
So, our guest today knows that better than anyone else. Jess Awtry is Vice President of Digital Strategy and Communications at the Pew Research Center. She's worked in local newsrooms at USA Today and now helps one of the most trusted research institutions in the country connect data to real audiences. Jess, welcome to the show.
Thank y'all. I am really excited to be here.
Oh
It's
my
gonna be
God, it's
fun.
such an honor to have you on the
It's an honor
show.
to be here.
So for anyone who isn't familiar, I guess how would you explain what data journalism is? Because that can be, I think, maybe a little esoteric for people who aren't familiar with the actual work.
Yeah, I mean, the good old days of like 10 years ago, we were still calling it CAR, computer assisted reporting, which was such an anachronistic term. But, data journalism it's just an extension of the natural curiosity that makes a good journalist. I mean, the best journalists say, why is this happening? Why are they digging a hole in the ground over there? What is the root cause of that problem over there? This is just an amplification of that. And I guess I put it in two buckets. There's the sort of data that allows journalists to get smarter about the pulse of their readers and their audiences. And then there's the types of data they can go out and find. And that's everything from the rise and fall of frozen yogurt chains to detailed survey data on the ethics of AI. And ultimately, it's about journalists being pattern recognition engines. We already do that. We already spot
Mm.
things. All humans do that. I mean, this notion of it's how we're hardwired, to tell the difference between a wolf and a tree when something moves in the leaves. It's no different. Good data and good journalism come together and you spot those things. And I think when you train yourself over time, they stick out just like, well, whatever, a wolf in the trees. If wolves live in trees, I guess.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I do my fair share of hiking around where I live, and so maybe not a wolf in the trees, but definitely a bear. That.
Right. Yeah. Better example.
So, what happens when newsrooms start to treat data like an afterthought? Or have you had any experiences where that's happened, where data can become like, well, it's not as sexy and isn't going to get us the clicks that we need to, generate income for advertising revenue and blah, blah, blah.
I mean, yes, is the short answer. I mean, one, I mean, just backing up to the word clicks. Clicks are data and they can be very clinical, but I always try to, when I'm working with newsrooms, divorce us from that notion. What is a click? It's a human decision. I mean, and it's only one signal, but when you take that in aggregate, the human decisions and the length of time people read an article and the amount of time they spend, it puts together a very clear definition of what your readers are telling you they will support you for, or at the very least, sort of what their most prurient interests are. But, even when you start tuning that out, I mean, data in and of itself is just numbers. But what's fascinating is the work we bring to it as journalists because you find the humanity in the data. I mean, I tell people every single chart out there tells a story. In fact, I used to, when I was training early data journalists, it's you put a chart up without any identifying labels and tell me what story does that tell? Well, something was very low and then it went very high and then it fell off a cliff suddenly and then it slowly went up. And then you put the axes next to it and you say, oh, that was the, trust in the media. And you can see it over the course of elections.
And then it's
Or
fallen
one,
off a cliff.
right, I'd say the one that goes down all the time, which is print newspaper revenue. But, data tells a story. And for people who think that data is clinical or bland, they're not humanizing the data. All the way down to the local or civic level, you can go get car accident data and police response time in and of itself. Maybe that's not a fascinating tale until you take that to the human level and look at the human cases where slower first responder response time at these intersections caused real havoc for the families who were impacted. So, ultimately, data, yes, there will always be nerds like me who just love going elbows deep in data, but most of our readers want that human connection, whether you're talking about the public or whether you're talking about it in terms of your own news operation to guide the strategy. The one other thing I would say too is, you talked about clicks and types of journalism that drives clicks. It's also about inside the newsroom, what are you measuring? Is it clicks or is it digital subscriptions? A lot of newsrooms these days have paywalls in place. The number of things that drive digital subscriptions are very different from the sorts of things that drive those clicks. And making sure that you listen to those signals can help, I think, guide you towards smarter, more impactful journalism.
Mm.
And that's interesting because, I feel like, do you think enough newsrooms actually practice that? Do you think enough newsrooms actually practice looking at things that specifically? Because I feel like sometimes I get the sense a lot of people don't even know what they're looking for. They'll look at somebody else saying they're doing really successful there, and I want that, as opposed to looking at like, wait a minute, what do our readers want? What do our people want?
That's all we should be doing. To me, any newsroom editor these days needs to have a little bit of analyst in their DNA. And the reality is we've always had it because we have gut instinct, and gut instinct comes from experience. A lot of times we'll have an intrinsic sense of this is a great story, this is going to move mountains, or this is going to go nuts on the internet, or this is going to or this nobody's going to read this. Why do we have those gut instincts? Because we have the data at some point, and so this is just in a lot of ways closer attention to data sort of just retrains your gut biome. I guess it's like the probiotic yogurt of journalism. It just retrains it with fresh perspectives. But to answer your question, I think far too many newsrooms still aren't focusing on listening. I don't even want to call it data, but listening to their audiences in the ways that matter. A click, that's easy to measure. We've been doing that for 25 years. That's a piece of cake. Measuring what caused somebody to get out their credit card and type in the numbers and subscribe, that's complicated and that's hard to measure. And so it's much easier for people to say, I'm not going to worry about it. Let's not measure that. Because believe me, it gets complicated. Did they subscribe to read one article, or was that the sum total of a month's worth of articles that they couldn't read and wanted to read? And this was the one that contributed to that. It's a gray area. People call that, we could talk about time decayed linear attribution modeling. But the bottom line is newsrooms, nobody has the patience for that, nor should they.
Hmm.
But we can agree on, as a news organization, what are the things that are important to us? Are they digital subscriptions? Are they page views? Are they loyal readers? Are they newsletter subscribers? And I think once you rally around that, you can decide the course of the DNA of your newsroom. Because I think I've told people recently, you become what you measure. And
Mm.
Hmm.
yeah, if all we care about is page views, and increasingly from like a news wonk business perspective, the value of a page view today is worse than it's ever been, we might be backing the wrong horses there. So I do think we need to focus on the things driving what supports journalists.
Okay, I had a different follow-up question, but now I need I'm sorry, decay linear attribute. What is that?
Okay, so there's all of these ways you can measure. Again, a page view is easy. Click the mouse, boop, page view. A subscription is easy. Somebody gave us a credit card, ka-ching. The factors contributing to that are tough. And you could say, if they tried to read an article and they couldn't read it and then they subscribed, well, that article gets the credit. That's what they subscribed for. That's just like one click, that's attribution. You can do a time decay attribution model that can go in a line, which basically says we're going to take the moment somebody subscribed, and then we're going to get in our time machine and like retroactively track them over the past 30 days. What were all the things they did leading up to that? Did they visit, 87 crime articles and then they subscribed to a sports article? Well, those 87 crime articles should get some of the credit because they've been coming back to us time and time again for that. Or did they sign up for a newsletter that they opened every day and then decided to subscribe because that newsletter had them hitting the paywall? I mean, so basically a time decay model. I'm so far down in the weeds. I pity
No,
your
I
listeners
love
right
it.
now, but it just gives
No,
things a little bit of credit. 30 days ago gets less credit than the thing that you got the credit card out for, but everything counts a little bit.
Well,
but
no,
you
I think that so many people would be it as in the weeds as that is. I do think that that's very, very helpful, especially as more of us become our own brands as independent
Yeah.
journalists.
and
Yeah,
also
I
I
mean,
wanted to
just along those lines of independent journalists, I mean, yeah, these are problems that persist in a 300 person news operation. They are even more sort of painstakingly important when you're an independent journalist because at that point, where are you getting your paycheck? Is it directly from subscribers? Is it through the ads and sponsorships that you're putting out there? Is it through the product mentions you put in on TikTok? Is it through your partnerships? Really understanding what drives your personal business today and what can drive it over the next few years. I think that that sort of business acumen, most of us got into this business to tell stories, not because we were great
Mhm.
at P&L statements.
But don't you think, just this is part of my thing, is the fact that the business model for journalism just never caught up to what you're talking about. It feels like a lot of it to me ends up feeling like it's catch up. You know what I mean? And it feels like it's people's, honestly, I don't even know if anybody, at least that's, I could just speak from certain experiences I've had. I feel like a lot of places are doing this whole catch up. Isn't aside from, let's say, social media and the internet, I mean, is this also a part of the reason why journalism is in the state that it's in? Is that some of these organizations just haven't really applied what you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, journalism in the 21st century is just is a fascinating case study in being like 3 years too late for everything, if not
Mhm.
more. I mean, we keep missing the boat, and there are plenty of like good like agitators in newsrooms saying, "Y'all, we're missing this boat," and every doggone time we miss it, the original sin and maybe of putting all of our content online for free because whatever, digital is kind of a fun toy, starting there and assigning a value of zero to our content back in, I don't know,
Yeah.
call it the
Yep.
late 90s. And, we missed that single opportunity. And since then, it's been, well, we know digital's growing, but we can't. The thing that makes all of our money today, whether that's broadcast TV, whether that's the print edition of your magazine or newspaper, that line's only going down, but holy moly, it's so much higher than the digital revenue line, which is so low. But we ride that line too long, even though it keeps going down. But any smart person can say, look, sooner or later, those lines are going to cross. Let's focus on lifting up the other line instead of trying to ride the decline. And that happened with the move to digital. That happened with the leap to social. I remember having so many frustrating conversations with journalists who were offended with the notion that they would have to like tweet about their own content. Like, wait a minute, I isn't that marketing's job? Like, why would I go and it's funny because that seems so quaint now because who are I mean, the influencers and the journalists out there who are successful get that. They get
No,
the
I
concept of
100%.
marketing.
I
Hmm.
think about, what I lovingly call my disassociation time on TikTok. But but
Yes.
no, but I've noticed a large number of journalists and some people like myself, you can tell we're still getting comfortable being in this space. And it seems to me the challenge is that when you're in social media, you are the brand and your brand is telling the story, your brand, you as the person. Whereas traditionally, those of us who at least were trained traditionally were taught that the story comes first and you just happen to be the person who was telling it or something like that. Like you're not out front and social media demands, no, I want you, the personality out front, and then tell me the story. And that's an awkward place to be.
Yeah. I mean, other than, a marquee columnist or an anchor, I mean, we were all encouraged as journalists to tell the story, but but not be part of the story, to be in a lot of ways a
Hmm.
Exactly.
faceless
Hmm.
cog. And we see it in the data and all of, I mean, Pew Research data that trust in brands, in news brands is going down, but trust in individuals is going up. And so, yeah, there is increasingly more value to being a trusted journalist than being part of a brand. And there's still high trust for legacy institutions, but people are skeptical. And we've probably given them reasons to be along the way, but bottom line is we're here today, and people don't trust institutions, they trust people.
But interesting. The way I also see it too is these larger institutions having, when we think about it, Jenna, when you're talking about like when you're mentioning about we grew up in a time where it was like you were saying just not part of the story. It was about the story itself. That kind of worked for these larger models because in a sense they controlled how the story got put out there, and also it kept the actual person who reported the story as you're not getting too big out there. We control, you don't end up, maybe you don't get too big out there that you think you can start bouncing around, or the fact that you could find another job, maybe you get hired by somebody else. It's kind of, it works to their advantage to keep people more under control of the actual institution.
Oh, I
So
never
therefore when
thought
you,
of it that way.
Yeah.
well, I mean, that's the way I'm trying to think, because I'm thinking that there was a period in time where companies, they didn't want their people who worked on on their shows to be promoting anything. Now all of a sudden they all like, get out there. You got to have an account. You have, it's like, because now they're struggling and they will take that risk on our content. But in the past, they were in control. They were making the money. And in that
Mhm.
sense, they controlled the content, they controlled you know what I'm saying? That's the way I'm sort of seeing it. And I think that's part of it. It's fascinating. But again, this is happening because as we're talking about this, it's like hitting me. I'm like, oh yeah. I mean, it's true. Like we felt kind of tied to this model that doesn't really work anymore and hasn't worked for
Mhm.
a long time.
I remember the first time I was working at Salt Lake Tribune at the time, and we were looking to hire a senior reporting position, and we were talking about their social media following at the time. And Twitter had only been around a few years, and we were all still so optimistic about like the social media that it was going to democratize everything. And I know we were so naive, but
I know.
we were as part of the hiring process, we were thinking, well, how many followers is this person bringing to the table? And I just took a step back, and you think, we are in a different level of the game now, and in a lot of
Hmm.
ways that does give power, Dom, to what you're saying, back to individuals and creators.
Well, so here's one of the things that I've also wondered, and we've spoken to some, especially younger journalists, Gen Zs, who very much understand that I am not just a journalist, I am a brand. But where does that leave us with the notion of objectivity? And does that even still hold the way that it did? Because I just don't see people buying the whole Walter Cronkite, I don't have an opinion about anything thing anymore, which again, you could easily poke holes in the fact that a cisgendered straight white man, of course, you have an opinion, but I just don't see audiences as engaged with that or even looking for that. It's almost as if, like, sure, I would love to see, maybe a liberal journalist have a conversation with a conservative, but I want to know who you are as a person. And I don't believe that you don't have an opinion.
Yeah, I mean, Pew Research, I mean, I've always been a data nerd. Now I get to work at like the Willy Wonka of data nerd places.
Hmm.
But we did a poll, I think it was over the summer, and it was around 9,000 people. But they expect a lot of us, whether we're a capital J journalist or an independent creator. I mean, 9 out of 10 say, of course, you have to be honest. But the other things that they rank right below that, or you have to be intelligent, which, okay, well, I appreciate that they still want that, even though viewing patterns don't always seem to line up with that. But
Nope.
the number third is authenticity. And those all three are like very close. For the record, the fourth one is kindness, and that's a long way down. It's like only 6 out of 10 care if we're kind, but 8 out of 10 needs to be authentic. And that gap for me, I think, speaks a lot. That increasingly today's audiences do want you to put your cards on the table. And you know what? Some people can do that. I think where we have to go, if a lot of us, and I will call myself an old school journalist in this sense, I will do my best to be as objective as I can. I am not comfortable sharing, political leanings and the like, but I keep telling people you can have tone without bias. You can be a real human. I can tell somebody that I'm a vegetarian. I'm not, but I could tell somebody if I were, and that in and of itself does not compromise me as my ability to be a journalist, but it humanizes. It lets people know I am a real three-dimensional person. I'm not robo-journalist, and you only see me from the waist up, and I've got robot legs below that. No, we're real authentic people. And so I think, my advice to journalists out there is if you're not in a position where you're ready to put those cards on the table, if you do want to try and be a nonpartisan face, it's a tricky space to be in these days, but the very least you can be is a real human.
Well, I definitely will say, having started out in radio, that wasn't always an issue for me. But once I got to broadcast television, I don't know, I just kind of felt like whenever I was in spaces, and I would notice this depending on the conversation of who I was interviewing, my presence as a Black woman it would always color whatever kind of interview that I was doing. No pun intended. But I want to go back to your earlier point about following, like data in terms of what it is that, people are engaging with and what it is that they want and delivering more of that. Um, I know that this probably works better in the art world, but I consider journalism to be an art
Yeah,
form. And that is, does that not leave room for the innovation that the audience didn't even know that they wanted? Like, if I think of music, for example, I don't think anybody knew they wanted David Bowie, but we're all super glad we got him.
exactly. Yeah, that's where we get into, and I mean, I always tell people there's an art and a science to this, and we can't hew towards either one. I think there was a part, not too far ago in our history where we like to think we know better than the readers, and we would force feed, down like you said, we could afford to be a gatekeeper to some extent. There's no gate anymore. We're just like trying to
Mhm.
hold up a picket fence, and people are just streaming around us. But no, I think if we pivot too hard and we sort of only look at the empirical data and only give people more, we're just as guilty on that side. The way I like to put it is you use the science to fund the art, I guess, in this case, in that
Oh.
we give readers some of what they're asking for us. We figure out how to map that to things that match our values. An example I used to do in local is if we keep seeing in the real-time data that, that people will click on every car crash story we do, yes, one answer to that is strap a police scanner to everybody's hip and go chase ambulances. The other answer to that could be, is there public service somewhere in there for us to be able to tell people here are the most deadly intersections in town when we tracked it over 2 years, or here are the parts of town that have the most intersect, let's add some intersectionality there with household demographics or race or income levels, and let's start assigning deeper value and patterns to what the audiences are telling us they're interested in at the core. That's one way to do it. And the other way is basically acknowledging we write about the crash stories to fund the experiments we want to make. And any of those things are good, but I often viewed that, whether I was with Newsweek or USA Today, we do a lot of things that fund the bigger picture journalism that is going to be important, that is going to be meaningful, that is going to maybe move mountains and change minds, but not millions. It might be thousands or hundreds, depending on your audience. And if you only go in saying, I want to matter to these handful of people, you're never going to make it. And so it's figuring out how to balance the things that make money with the things that matter to us.
Capitalism. Dom, you got a question?
Yes. Switching gears a little bit, we want, after the 2016 election, there was a lot of discussion about people questioning and doubting the polling that happened back then, and with good reason. How can journalists do a better job? Or, I mean, actually, first, I guess, do you think they are doing a better job in interpreting the polling data, um, or knowing when to question the data? Because it felt like back then that was not, don't think it really was, it didn't feel so much it was happening back then. I honestly don't even know if I feel like it's a better job now, but I'm curious. What do you think, Jess?
There's like three layers, there's interpreting the polling data and whether we're interpreting it correctly, but then there's just the quality of the poll. And
Hmm.
I think so many times, because we all can't afford to be huge data nerds, we know there's a difference between a Twitter poll or an open survey monkey and a sample margin of error, probability poll. But beyond that, we don't necessarily look under the hood. And ultimately that every journalist can't afford to look under the hood of the quality of the poll. And so they have to start trusting. I come back to trusting brands, but they have to trust people. And I was thinking about this a little bit. I mean, Pew Research Center, I didn't know before I started here a few months ago the painstaking effort that they put in place to try and get this right, because 2016 was a wake-up call. So was 2020 to some extent. I mean,
Hmm.
polls are often wrong. Pew Research Center does a few different things with that. I mean, one, we have our own panels. We're not buying someone else's data and interpreting it. We've got 10,000 people in some cases. We'll go get more in others. But then we try and oversample underrepresented groups, and we get into statistical weighting. And I am happy to dive into all those weeds. But we basically try and make sure that our panel lines up with America, but is always large enough to make sure that, I mean, if you've got a 100-person poll, a few people have a hard time representing an entire population. But if you go out to a 10,000 person poll, it's much more likely you'll get enough people to represent even small populations. And so, I mean, we make sure that we have people who take the survey on desktop computers and mobile devices, but also those people who only take them via telephone. Bless their hearts, because they're a demographic that we wouldn't normally get, or people who only take the polls on paper. We make sure that we're actually getting all those to make sure all income levels are represented and that we're tracking
Wow.
all of that. So again, I can go all out on the weeds, but I think so much of it is incumbent on polls. And I think that journalists out there think they can run a poll, but it's hard. I mean,
Well,
it's
that's always been one of my questions is, and you sort of touch on this, is the diversity within the polling research that's done. Because, like you said, one person certainly does not speak for an entire demographic. Um, I guess but also sometimes when it comes to, because sometimes polling is done within specific demographics, and then is the diversity within how niche does it get, is my question.
yeah, I mean, that's where the more people you have, the better you can do. And that's the one thing I've learned, is that polling is expensive. I mean, it costs thousands of dollars per single question that we ask, times 80 questions, times hundreds of questions a year. And knock on wood, I mean, thank goodness Pew Research Center, we're fortunate enough to have the funding to do that. But increasingly, media organizations, and certainly not, a two-person Substack team or anything else,
Hmm.
have that ability. And so, I mean, like in the case of Pew Research Center, like multi-million dollar recruitments of Black Americans, like in 2021, a couple of years ago, it was a big, hugely costly recruitment of Asian Americans to be on the panels, Latinos all the way back in 2019, like ongoing, making sure that we're spending a lot of money to recruit people to come in, and we do pay them a little for taking these surveys. It's not just a goodness of anybody's heart, but it takes constant maintenance, because we've got a whole division of people, and I never would have known this before I joined here, who they don't necessarily do the analysis. They're certainly not in communications. They do nothing other than stare at the makeup of these panels to make sure that they look like, that's their job, to make sure that the panels are constantly reflective of America, which is pretty cool. Yeah.
Well, for the record, I don't think a computer can do that. But that's just my ongoing thing now, is
Yeah.
that I'm constantly looking at specifically niche jobs and being like, yeah, but I don't think AI can do that. Anyway, that's my own paranoia.
Um,
But my other thing though is, how important is it that when polling is done, that questions are specific? And I've never been involved in a poll. And I'm going to assume maybe that's because I'm a journalist or something. I don't know. But
right.
so I don't know how specific questions are, but I do know frequently when polling is presented to the public, it's very general and generic. And my favorite example is, do you think the question, excuse me, not the question, do you think the country is moving in the right direction? A conservative and a liberal are both likely going to say no for completely different reasons. So, what does that really tell us?
Yeah, I mean, we completely agree. The question again, coming back to our super nerdy methods team, and we've got so many people on this team, and they do nothing other than like cross-examine their own questions all day. In fact, I sat through a 1 hour session yesterday where they were talking about double-barreled questions, which is a term I'd never heard before, which is, are you a cook who likes to use vegetables in your cooking? And have you ever eaten meat? Or yeah, that's a terrible example because I'm not a methods person, but it leaves people guessing, wait, which part of the question am I supposed to answer? Do I answer the first and second? Well, this one applies, this one doesn't. Oh, but they're paying me $10. I better pick an answer. And what they found over time, and they measured, oh, that's not the best way. If we break it in half, if this, then you'll answer this. But if you say no to this, we'll just skip that, resulted in much more accurate answers. I mean, point being, yes. I mean, and we know this as journalists too. The way you ask the question is going to work people towards an answer. And so, yeah, there's a lot. I mean, that's why organizations like 538, and when they were in their heyday, and they're like rated pollster reputability. It is important.
Yeah, and it's and just saying, like, I do think, like, when we talk about double, like when Jenna was talking about the 50, I think sometimes, like, when you're talking about half Americans, like the country's going in the wrong direction. Sometimes too, there are media outlets that do, if they are more leaning towards conservative or if they're more leaning towards liberal, sometimes they use that, I feel, as a way to get their point across of something. Like, I do think sometimes, not everybody, but I do think sometimes they do that because they want to pull their point out. Like, look, most Americans are, because they're speaking towards their audience. They want a particular answer, and that feeds to their narrative. But aside from that, we kind of did want to go into the whole thing of talking about AI. Um,
Mhm.
and how, it's already reshaping how, journalism works. Um, how how do you see it changing how, data journalism specifically? Do you see it impact,
I
how
mean,
do, like, how do you see it, and or how it could be used in that way?
I know we can't ignore it. Let's start there. I mean, I've talked to still too many journalists, and it's like, doggone it, we have missed so many trends. Are we going to miss this one too? Oh, like, no, we can't. The trick is to do what we do best, which is one, let's not stick our head in the sand. But two, let's then pivot to, oh, I can't just believe I just used the word pivot, but I mean, let's not stick our head in the sand, but then let's move towards doing what we do, which is figure out how to use it ethically. Um, and mixing it with a sense of values. And to that sense, like if we say that we're not going to let it compromise our standards, but we will use it as an assistant, what can it do? I mean, can it write B matter better and faster for us? Can it be that research assistant that goes and gets some stuff so we can then do what we do and add value and make a cohesive narrative? Yes, to all of the above. I am very pro using AI if it means that journalist gets to go do what they got into the business to do. And very few of us got into this business to do stenography, to go and figure out how to reword B matter about a voting record that hundreds of other people have already had to struggle with how to slightly rewrite it for. Let AI pull some of that together for you so you can spend your time thinking about the deeper angle and the bigger story. I mean, yes, ultimately we are accountable for anything AI publishes. We do have to take the time to fact check obsessively, doubly so when we're using AI assistants. But the analogy I like to use with journalists, and this is my nerdy reference here, it's that we are better if we use, I mean, Iron Man is stronger than Tony Stark, i.e., suit of armor around a person, but Iron Man's good guy, Ultron's bad guy. And so ultimately, yes, let's use AI as an exoskeleton, but not as an independent entity to save the world because we have seen too many of those movies. Um, I'm still traumatized by Terminator, but yeah, and
Well,
so
no,
no,
no, I think that also there's a meme of a smoking Sarah Connor, just like you people need to
yes.
stop.
Oh, and I mean, like to me, it has huge societal implications. How does a rookie journalist get to be a seasoned journalist? I mean, all those things are scary. How do we get there? We got there by doing a lot of reps, a lot of stories, writing a lot of B matter ourselves. I do worry about that, but I do know that today if I've got, I mean, if I'm a journalist and I'm on the hook to turn three stories that day, and I hate that that exists for too many people, but it does, I'd much rather they spent time figuring out how to take a breath, how to go a little deeper, how to pick a better angle, how to even put a better headline on it, or spend a little more time to call the right sources to add some uniqueness. And when you bring it into the data components, the same thing holds true. I like to use AI as sort of like my big eye of Sauron. I'm getting so nerdy in here, but
This is the
it's great.
place.
Yeah,
Like it
yes.
shines a
Yep.
spotlight on something, but ultimately all that does is tell you where you can start your focus. It helps you crystallize something. And I, again, unabashed user, I will use it to say, what are some story angles that are uncovered out there that we good to think on? Now, I think to me it crosses a line if I say, great, now you go write those stories as an AI.
Yeah.
No, no, no. I mean, we're humans, we're going to write them, but yeah, sure. Please go search trends, go see what's uncovered that where we could make a dent.
Well, it's really interesting when you say that because I was thinking of I used to cover the State House in Albany, New York, and I remember one of my colleagues who worked up there was sitting at his computer and he had like a little click thing, a counter, and he was like going through like some sort of testimony, and every time somebody said a certain word, he was counting it out. And I remember being like, is that the best use of your time? But it was critically important for the story that he was doing. He was making an excellent point. But I just remember being like, yeah, that's the tedium of this job that sometimes just really, yeah. So I could see that as being a thing that could be helpful.
Yeah.
I do want to ask the question though, given with AI and so much, I guess, are we officially calling it AI slop now? I'm not sure what
Yeah,
the,
I think we're
okay.
there. Yeah.
All right.
There's the
So
term that's caught on out there as far as clankers.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Okay. So if the clankers start filling up the what the zeitgeist, if you will, with false generated content. I mean, there's just so much out there. I guess like one of the things that I kind of wonder or worry about, and a lot of this has to go back with the public's ability to and willingness to engage in fact checking, but can that also help muddy up waters that you could really generate up a poll to say anything that you want it to?
Yeah. I mean, there are some polling outlets out there that are using, like, I don't remember the right terms for it, but sort of synthetic answers where they use AI to represent the views of, like, that makes me very nervous. We're not talking about anything along those lines because humans might be predictable sometimes, but we're still individuals. So yeah, I mean, fully agreed. But to the deeper point of misinformation and AI slop, yes. I mean, the thing that worries me there, this is I'll just add fuel to the scary fire and not figure out how to solve it yet, but
The
is
worry
yes, there's
box.
right. There's a today problem, which is people finding whatever they want to find to make them feel better about their point of view, like cognitive dissonance. We've decided as a society we don't want that anymore. We will go find something, even if we kind of know it might not be true. Doggone it, it feels good. I worry about that from a today perspective, but I worry about that from a 5 year from now perspective because what else is happening? Well, once it's on the internet, it is crawled and fitted into an LLM's biases. And as
Mm.
the tenor of the internet changes, now 7 years from now, someone in the public is asking an AI for an answer. The answer they're going to get is going to be very different, and it's going to be susceptible to a volume game. Whoever says the most things the most times is going to get cited the most regularity.
That's what I'm thinking of is like, what if like you get an algorithm or something to just scrape the web and be like, well, people are talking about this. And I'm like, well, that's also a reflection of who's online in the first place.
Exactly. Yeah. And I wish I could say I had an answer to that. I mean, I don't, unfortunately, but it's a huge fear that I have. I mean, we're trying to do our own few things to help stand in the way of that. We're doing what we're calling micro publishing, where we are not letting an AI connect the dots between a bunch of facts. We'll take a whole bunch of facts and put them out there as like invisible separate articles, basically, like 3 sentence articles, so that when someone searches for that thing in an AI chat engine, it's not having to try and invent the answer. We've made it very easy in one place, like we've connected a few dots for them. I don't know if that's a
Mm.
bet that'll pay off, but it's something we're experimenting with just to see does that help improve the quality of that information over time.
what about, of course, almost every news article or any story has some kind of AI summary attached to the top of it. And let's be real, most people are rushing through the day. They're just going to look at that summary. What's the risk? Like what's the risk of, I guess that is what people, that's the most people will end up reading from that article rather than reading the whole thing in its full context. That's the information they're getting when we're walking away with.
I mean, that's a tough one, Dom. There's a couple of risks there. The risk that most people probably don't think of for now is if people read the summary, whether it's a Google summary or even if it's on the news website and it's a summary at the top, that is decimating our ability to pay more journalists. Obviously, if they don't click through to Google, but even if they do, or from Google, even if they do click through to the article, they read the top. What are they not seeing? The 11,000 ads that we have down below, the chum box at the bottom telling you that drivers in your state are getting lower car insurance, whatever it is. Like,
Hmm.
we can hate that experience, but it's paying the rent payments for a lot of journalists out there to do good quality work. And so, in a lot of ways, news outlets with AI summaries are shooting themselves in the foot. But the other piece is if we don't make it easy for people, if we don't give them the summary, they won't visit at all. And so, I mean, for me, it's not a case of do the summary or not do the summary. I think in a lot of ways we have to. I think from a journalism perspective, it's how do we figure out where we're making our money if it's not from the 8 trillion ads, and that's a whole separate conversation. We talk about media business models, but
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, ultimately our audiences, this comes back to listening. I mean, they're shouting at us, and if they're telling us they don't have enough time, to me that says we have to do something with that. If we just steadfastly say no, you do have enough time to read my work, they're saying now that may mean what we need to do is tell better stories, because we know that there are some things. I mean, someone will spend distraction time, half hour on TikTok. It's not the
Hmm.
case of time. It's, are we being compelling enough? So I think it forces us into facing ourselves in tough ways. Are stories really as good as we think they are? Um, Back when we had the first sort of real-time analytics tool, we were using a company called Chartbeat at the time, but lots of companies do this now. You'll see a counter of, 87% of your readers made it to here. Oh, you lost 20% of them in that one paragraph. Oh, and then you get to the bottom and 9% of readers made it to the bottom. Um, that's sad stuff, until I remember one particular journalist in our newsroom would look for where she lost 20% of her readers, and she would go look at the big board in the newsroom, and then she would clomp back over to her desk and reword that paragraph and wait about 5 minutes and watch that fix itself. Oh, and now people are reading a little deeper. I mean, so if you're listening to our readers and we're
Wow.
not ignoring them, there can be goodness in it too.
Wow. Okay. I literally never thought of that. What were you gonna
Yeah.
say?
No, no, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, I do want to pivot though.
Yeah.
Um, so when it comes to journalists learning from creators, because that's also a theme that we've talked about a lot on this podcast, and sharing with audiences who's behind their work and things of that nature. Um, I guess, is there any value in sharing data? First of all, is it data or data?
I don't know. I didn't
I
watch
think it's,
Next
I think they
Generation.
both, I checked this out because I know we were saying no, because
I
I think both are
realize as I'm
correct. It's
talking,
just
I
two
don't
different. I
know.
know, no, it's so funny because I bounce back and forth as we're speaking sometimes on those. Like I
Yeah,
was like data. They say technically both are correct. I guess it's one is more,
perfect.
yeah, whatever.
Okay,
So
all right. It
go
can be
ahead,
like the
Jenna.
eternal question: is it
Yes.
controller or
Right.
comptroller? Anyway, another nerdy point. So anyway, the point is that is engage, like sharing some raw data or something like that. Like, and this is where I got, like, to tell a story, and this is where I got that from. Is that valuable to audiences, considering just the pervasive level of skepticism? Like, how can you say this, that, and the other? Because the data that it says,
Yeah.
even though I don't know, because then at the same time, we've had scientists at this point to data, and people are still like, I don't believe it.
It matters to the right people. That's the way I'd put it, I guess, is, for the vast majority of the people that you're writing for, no, they will be predisposed to love or hate your work or place entirely unfair value judgments on you as a person, regardless of that. But for the people that you're trying to get through to, they're going to appreciate knowing that that's there. I mean, I've seen that time and time again in the number of people who make it to the bottom of the story And then, I mean, in the case of news, we get a little fairness meter at the bottom of the story. I was terrified when we published that, thinking, oh, who on earth thinks our work is fair? But north of 8 out of 10, no, not 9 out of 10, but 8 out of 10 people who made it to the bottom of the story said that is fair. However, we did see that if they jumped right down to the bottom and they didn't evaluate, if they just looked at the headline, they were much more likely to vote that it wasn't fair. And so, I mean, that's my way of saying that if you take the time to put in the homework, to link to your sources, to tell people where you got the data, to be painstakingly transparent, will it matter to mass audiences? Probably not. But will it matter to your fans? Will it matter to like your loyalists and sort of, foot soldiers and recruits of people who love and appreciate you? Yes. I mean, that's what separates us from others out there.
So, where do you see the field going, Jess? Like, where do you see this going as AI becomes more part of, part of journalists, part of the industry? It's being used more. How the industry is changing, social media, all like, where do you see it going uh, over the next like year, 5 years? Feels to be changing so fast.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking 5 years, I'd be an idiot to forecast 5 years, but I'm going to be an idiot. Let's do it anyway. I
Join
mean,
us.
Exactly.
right? I mean, what the heck? But no, I mean, look at where it's going and look at how fast it's happened already. This shift to a creator-driven news world has been so fast. And by creator, I mean, people who are not affiliated with the news brand, who are out there independently, whether it's on TikTok or Substack or Spotify. Um, what was the stat that we just published a few weeks ago? I mean, 1 in 5 get their news from TikTok.
Hmm.
I would have lost that bet a year ago, much less
Oh,
5 years ago.
totally.
I mean, 1 in 5, that's enormous. If you are under 30, that number is appreciably half. I mean, it's like it's 40 some percent. But half of Americans under 30 get their news from TikTok. So what has to change is journalists have to be there. Whether you're an independent journalist or not, you have to be there. If you're a big journalism organization, if you fund a lot of journalists, you have to figure out how to make money there because creators are. They're doing it through products. They're doing it through not display ads and car insurance chum boxes, but they're doing it through ways that are ethical. And so where are we going? I think we're going towards a lot of independent people. People who trust personalities. And I think we can still be unbiased. I think there's more revenue in being biased, but there is a lane for people who truly do want to be nonpartisan and in a way to still make a good living doing that. I think we're there. I think it's independent outlets. I think it's unfortunately dragging people to your news website in 2025, much less 2030. That's increasingly a losing proposition, and your website ultimately is not a place where new readers visit. It's a home base for your loyalists. And I think we're moving into let's do the things AI can't do. If you're a journalist, build up your name enough, but then start figuring out how you use your name to connect people because AI is terrible at connecting people. Um, there's a reason that things like Punch Bowl started, and they started around an event strategy, which has been great for them. Newer news publications, Semaphore, I mean, Axios to some degree, they're huge in the event space. They pull people together in the real world. They help people connect with people. I see a future where journalists can do that with their circles of people. Um, Again, I could go on all day, but I don't think it's the end for journalism. I think that it's a scary future. It's a future of which brands don't rule things, but that can be a good thing. Like we were saying back at the beginning, Dom, I think it puts power in the hands of individual creators. I think it's a harder row to hoe. If you want to take the high road and be nonpartisan, I think it's needed, and I really hope people do it. But we're seeing this money. I don't like the fact that we have to be beholden to others' algorithms. It's what killed BuzzFeed. The Google
Yep.
Discover algorithm is
Hmm.
killing off
Hmm.
many more sites. Here we go again. But I don't think we have a solution to that yet.
No, no. I mean, I think there were some ideas of we treat social media as a utility, but that got shot down in Congress.
Yeah, right. Idealism. It's so naive.
I know it's Congress where good ideas go to die.
Right.
Um, I did want to ask you before we let you go, because we've had a fabulous conversation, but we are running out of time. So I did want to ask you, how did you come to journalism? What was your path to get here to this, just, I don't know, beleaguered place where still so many of us find hope and joy and purpose?
Yeah, I mean, I started, I guess, whatever the bottom is, I started there. One, I thought I was going to be a high school band director. It was I went to a tiny school in the middle of Nebraska, a little liberal arts school called Hastings College, where 1,000 students. So if you wanted to be the editor of the paper, they pretty much always needed one. If you wanted to, they had technology everywhere. If you wanted to use it, you just went in there and pushed some buttons. And so it was a great playground. Um, but I thought I was going to be a band director. Journalism was a hobby, but I graduated, and I remember this catalyzing moment was I went to go buy reeds, and I was trying to figure out where I was going to get my master's degree in saxophone performance or not. And the person I went to buy some more saxophone reeds for, he was actually going through his master's program, and I was like, well, that doesn't bode well for me, like my job future. And so I graduated and found a job 20 miles up the road working the night copy desk at a small paper, nights and weekends and holidays, laying out wire pages in central Nebraska. And it went from there. I started in page design and layout and moved up into this whole digital thing that people weren't sure if it was going to go anywhere or not. And then the detour through this, the other catalyzing moment was when I was working in a large newsroom and discovered web analytics for the first time. And I printed out a whole bunch of things because printing out was something we did. And I took it to my editor and said, look at this. Did you know we can actually see, like, by reporter what stories or people are reading and how many pages? And she like looked through it for like 10 minutes and she turned it face down on her desk and said, nobody can ever see this. And
Wow.
that was the moment where I thought, okay, there's a better way to run a newsroom. I mean, we should be listening to our readers and then translating that to our ethics. And it went from there. I mean, I ran local newsrooms from teeny tiny operations in Idaho all the way up to big shops. And it's always going to be a part of me. But I guess I thought I was going to be a band director. And then I fell in love with listening to readers, I guess, is when you get down to it.
I mean, I don't think you can go wrong with that.
No.
Jess, thank you so much. This has been a fun, I mean, believe it or not, you made data fun, or at least you made it fun
Yep.
for me.
Yeah,
Yep.
hey, I try. Oh, sorry I drove down into the weeds so much, but like Jenna, Dom, you all are great. You kept me on track, but you kept things. Thank you. This has been like the best hour I've had all week, which is it's odd measurement
Oh.
of my week. No,
No,
this has been
seriously,
great.
this has really been great. So thank you so
Yeah, it
much for
does.
joining us. This has been, like I said, a very illuminating conversation, and there's so much more to data journalism than even I thought. So thank you.
Thanks,
Anytime.
Jess.
Laid Off and Looking is an independent podcast conceived of and created by Jenna Flanagan and Dominic Camia.
Music provided by Jake Howitt. Research by Laura Rothenbucker.
You can watch and follow us on YouTube.
Or you can listen and follow us wherever you get your podcasts.
And if you have any questions or suggestions, we want to hear from you. So leave a comment.
We do check them.
Or reach out to us anytime at laidofandlookingpod@gmail.com.
New episodes every Friday.